HB 734, yes, sir.
Okay, on House Bill 734, on your bill, please, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. HB 734 provides for victim notification measures in capital cases after conviction and allows victims' families to sign a form that provides that there shall be no contact with their family. We saw and we continue to see, but particularly with the clemency cases that came about last year, 50-plus clemency cases, unfortunately, these victims who were traumatized and then re-traumatized with that sudden process thrust upon them were further re-traumatized by receiving letters that indicated that there were individuals who wanted to meet with them and really suggested that they were wanting to meet with them on their behalf and to help them through the process, when in fact it was just a ruse to get them to be able to talk to the opposition and try to get them to sway their testimony clearly and allowing these individuals to receive clemency. And this bill, what this bill does is allows for those victims' families to say, I don't want to be contacted. We have victim coordinators that can work should a victim's family, because what you generally will hear in the opposition is that some victims' families change their mind. They absolutely do. And these victims, there is an opportunity if a victim wants to meet with the individual who murdered their loved one, or wants to meet with the individual's lawyers, et cetera. There's an ability to do that through a victim coordinator, and so that process is available. This doesn't stop this. It just allows them to sign a form that says no contact and provides that to violate that form and provision is to then be in, it's obstruction of justice. And I believe, Senator, there's an amendment that was proposed.
Right, there is. And Senator Barrow does have a question at this point, sure. So I'm going to recognize her, and then we'll get to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm not sure if the amendment speaks to this at all, but as it relates to the victim service coordinator, do you know that process in terms of like how it's handled? Is there time parameters around it in terms of like when it happens, if a family does decide that they would like to speak to the perpetrator? Do you know like the time frame around how this happens?
It's my appreciation, Senator, that all the district attorneys have the victim coordinators, and they're available, as I would understand it, at any time to help with that process. And then, as you know, I believe with this amendment, there's also an outreach program through DOC, the Crime Victim Services Bureau. So there are any number of ways that an individual, a victim's family member, should the victim's family member want to be in touch with either the perpetrator or the family of the perpetrator or anyone, that can be arranged through a victim services coordinator, either through DOC or the DAs. It's just this. We've had instances where individuals have gone to their homes. They walk out their door and they're confronted with it. We've had instances where they sit, in lobbies and listen to conversations and approach them.
Too much.
Yeah.
It seemed like the amendment, I guess it kind of clarifies like who, there's a organization, I'm assuming. Is anyone here from DOC that can talk about the process? No. And
I have no opposition to the amendment. I don't, to the extent that it's offered, we have no, and this was a Louisiana Sheriff's Association bill, and they have no opposition to it as well. And I know there were conversations last night with DOC, and so everybody's in agreement that if this amendment is offered and adopted, that there's no opposition to that.
I just wanted to kind of
Sure.
understand the process in terms of what happens and how long does it take? Like, is there a process? Like, is there a form you fill out, and then the victim coordinator receives it? Then they have to coordinate the time to kind of bring the two together. And is there a prospective time that is given that must occur? I'm just wondering. I don't know.
Well,
But thank you.
Senator Barrow, Zach Daniels with the Louisiana District Attorneys Association has requested to speak, so maybe
He can.
he can
Great.
help with that.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Zach Daniels, Executive Director of the Louisiana District Attorneys Association. And I reviewed the amendment. I'm not opposed to the concept. One thought I would have is to add it as an or, meaning that if you can't get in touch with the District Attorney's Victims Assistance Coordinator, you could also attempt to get in touch through the Department of Corrections rather than eliminating the prosecuting agency. Our Victims Assistance Coordinators in the state work very hard. What they will ordinarily do is between court dates. So, for instance, in possibly a 30-day timeline, to answer your question about the timeline, it will come up in court that, the criminal defendant wishes to make an offer or plead to something. Well, we certainly need to bring the victim's family in and speak to them about that. So our victims assistance coordinators are used to operating under quick timelines in terms of keeping open lines of communication both before and after a court date, ensuring that we are communicating with them and setting up meetings on short timelines. What I will say is that eliminating the prosecuting agency through the amendment, one thing you would lose in this process is that most of these prosecuting agencies, except for the very old cases, they're going to have a rapport with that victim's family. In the course of handling a murder case, you're going to meet with victims' families dozens of times. You're going to meet with them to prepare them for the process, prepare them for what they will see, and prepare them for what might happen should the case not go your way. I would say that the victims assistance coordinators in our offices are in a good position to keep those open lines of communication, and they wouldn't want these to linger, meaning that if this were set for clemency hearing and there was a request to meet with the victim's family, they are already used to working under that type of timeline of a 30-day or 60 days. So a short timeline that is not belabored. And my final thought there would be to add an or, rather than eliminating the prosecuting agency, add it as a prosecuting agency or Louisiana Department of Corrections.
Assuming this bill gets out of committee, rather than try to draft one here on the floor, I'm going to ask the staff right now if we would prepare a floor amendment to add an or so the prosecuting agency could also be a part of the process. But in any event, thank you for your testimony. Senator Barrow,
Yes,
you're still
I just want to
recognized.
follow up just a little bit. So is there paperwork? Is there something in terms of a paper trail that is actually attached to when the request is made? What kind of happens in terms of like the follow up or follow through? Did they meet? Is there anything, any type of documentation?
So my understanding is this would be a brand new system. So there would need to be a policy in place that is created to ensure that these requests are received, that they're processed in a timely fashion. And what I will say is that in meeting with victims, I would personally keep notes on every meeting with every victim I ever did as a prosecutor. I know victims assistance coordinators, this is a bit more anecdotal, will also do the same because it's simply impossible to remember everything without writing it down.
Correct.
So there would be some documentation of the victims assistance coordinators' efforts.
And who would be responsible for that information or keeping it?
They're ordinarily kept in a case tracking system with the district attorney's office.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Also in support, not wishing to speak, Mike Renatza, Louisiana Sheriff's Association. Gary Bennett in support, Louisiana Sheriff's Association. Darren Alleman, Jefferson Parish DA's office, and Billy Joe Harrington, President of the Louisiana District Attorneys Association support. Not wishing to speak in opposition. Mr. Riley would like to speak, and I think that's the only one who has requested to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Well, I read the bill, and I was thinking quite a lot of things about this bill. But I think the most important thing is, obviously putting oneself in the shoes of a victim's family. I've been in those shoes and known other people who've been in those shoes. So definitely, trying to limit, if not eliminate, any additional traumas is something that we can all agree upon. I think the bill would be stronger if there was an option for the victim's family to decide, I don't want to be contacted by anybody at all, not just representatives of the defendant, but also people from the state. And I don't want to know anything about this case forever after. I just want to try to put it in the rear view, and you can't call me up when this person, let's say, is going for clemency, and you get to call me up and say, come up if you want to oppose this, but the other team can't call me up and say, do you want to support this, right? It should go both ways. If people are going to have the option, if the purpose is to stop trauma and re-traumatization, people should have the option to check off the box, and then maybe they can choose, right? Nobody from the perpetrator's legal team can contact me, or nobody from the state as well. I want to just be done with this thing and move on with my life. I don't want to be called up every time there's either a bill or a legal decision or a post-conviction remedy. I don't want to be dealing with it at all. And I think that would make it a better bill for the sake of the people who are impacted, which is the intent of I assume the intent of the bill, as I heard from the last committee, was to limit that re-traumatization. So I think it would be better if you could get a blanket, I don't want to be contacted, not just from the defendant's side of things. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Representative Villio, you may close on your bill. I do have a couple more cards to read. Devin Davis in opposition with vote not wishing to speak. Emily Posner in opposition, provide information if requested. Ronald Marshall with vote in opposition. Now you may close.
Well, Villio's response would be we can fix it all and we can abolish clemency, and then nobody would be contacting from either side because we wouldn't be faced with that. I'd ask for favorable passage.
Point well taken. What's the pleasure of the committee? Oh, there's amendments.
You had it.
Oh, yeah, I had an amendment.
Didn't you say? Yeah.
Yeah, it was drafted, and I'm going to offer amendment set 2315. Is there any questions on the amendment? I think it's been passed out for a while. Any opposition to the amendment?
And that's the amendment, Senator, as I understand, you're going to work before it goes on the floor to add.
Yep, we're going to amend it again add the word "or" into it. And so there being no objection, that set of amendments is adopted.
Quickly on the amendment.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, on the amendment, since we're now adding the Department of Corrections in here, as it relates to keeping the paperwork and the tracking of this, who would be responsible at that time? Would it still go to the district attorneys, or will this also now be a part of something the DOC has to do? Just question.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But the Louisiana Victims Outreach Program is already a part of the Department of Corrections, so they probably have to keep up with it anyway.
Sure.
Okay. Well, we can find out. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the amendment was adopted, right? There was no objection. And so I will move to report House Bill 734 with amendments. Is there any objection? There being no objection, that bill will be reported with amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senators.
Chairwoman Villio.